Hello, everyone. Welcome to Victory Never Sleeps. See a couple of things over in the chat that I wanted to address first. Troubled guest. I remember you from last week. I'm very glad you decided to join us. We're excited to have you with us. And also, Virginia chiming in from great state of Alaska. It's always nice to have people on from the last frontier. Friend of mine I went to high school with had a birthday today, and I've been kind of, reminiscing about where I come from and growing up there. So welcome. I'm glad we've got Alaska in the chat room. Got a few things to talk to you about, some exciting stuff at the top of the show. First, thank you guys who are so very, very generous. People have been exceedingly generous today. Wanted to thank William in Pennsylvania, who donated $50 towards paying off Phrasehoff. Thank you, William. We appreciate it. My good friend Jamie donated $2,500 towards the pavilion. That is astounding, and it is deeply appreciated. Thank you for that, Jamie. We appreciate you very, very much. And our pillar of weekly generosity, GW Farnsworth, contributing $50 towards the pavilion. Thank you for that. We always appreciate your generosity. It's an example to us all. Stephen in Japan, another weekly donor with $5 towards the pavilion and $10 towards paying off Phrasehoff. Thank you, Stephen. And different Stephen, this one from Alaska, with $150 towards Phrasehoff. Thank you very much. Again, much, much appreciated. Thank you, guys. You are astounding with your generosity. So on that note, some updates. First, Phrasehoff. There we go. Got the graphic up. We are 39.2% paid off of Phrasehoff, which you guys have been tremendously generous. We are looking at a $102 per member would pay it off immediately, just to put it in perspective. Anybody interested in helping on any of these donation efforts, click the donate link at runestone.org/donate, and we really appreciate it. Also, kind of update on where we're at with the pavilion. Took a huge jump today from our generous donors. 13% towards getting that pavilion happening, which is amazing. I'm talking to people I say as we speak, but within the last day or so about getting the earthwork done to set up the pad for the for the pavilion, and then to get the price out what the concrete is going to cost us. So we're looking at that so that when we have the money, we will move on those steps and see some progress on it. 13% paid off. That breaks down to just about $40 per member would pay that off immediately. And to that note, our apprentice folk builder, Jill Gaffney in Pennsylvania, has come up with a double the timbers challenge. Jill would like to match dollar for dollar up to the first $300 we can generate. So your dollar has twice the impact if you donate that through the month of May. And we want to see how fast we can hit that $300 goal of this. So again, you guys figure out 300 and Jill will match it, and that'll be 600 total towards getting that pavilion. We're on track to have a great place to gather under come Einherjeblot this year. So thank you, guys. We're excited, and again, your generosity is very, very much appreciated. Svan, you remember where we were when you and I left off?
I believe, were we going over the Einherjar? I think we were just about to step into, or we had stepped. No, yeah, I think it was the Einherjar.
Perhaps. Did we talk about Freyr and Gerther?
Because we did a big section on. No, we
Okay.
did not. We stopped at the
All right.
Valkyrier.
Okay, so we got done with the Valkyria, and we will be starting at section 37. Anybody who is just tuning in, we are going over the poem The Gylfaginning tonight. And that is in the Poetic Edda. We are going to start tonight on section 37. And if you want to follow along directly where we're looking, it is at velusbau.org. That's where Svan and I have been going over the lore that we've gone over so far. And you can follow along there, but feel free to follow along in whatever translation you might have handy. Again, kind of to reiterate, because it's been a few weeks, we had 5 weeks in the month of April, so it's been a little bit since we were on here doing this. This piece is particularly foundational and special because the intent and the way the poem is laid out, it is very intentionally this is what the elder faith was by Snorri Sturluson, only a few generations after the Christianization of Iceland. So it is a very intentional explanation of what his forefathers believed. And, all the other, I was going to say, I'm trying to think if there's another one that does something similar, but this is the piece that most directly is intended to be an informative. This is what Asatru is. Other pieces we get glimpses. This is the story of Thor and an adventure, or this is the Seeress's prophecy, or this is the sayings of Har. This is audience that may not know. This is an explanation of my forefathers' faith of Asatru. And so that is particularly informative to us today. So that's why we are 8 episodes into a not very long piece, because it is really important. And also, we've been experimenting a little bit with kind of show format. We've been talking about the piece of lore in front of us for about an hour. At the hour break, we kind of take a stop and go through our questions and then get back into it as we can. The birth of this show has always been, about answering questions in the Q&A portion. So we're willing to take as long as it takes to get through the material. We want to make sure we're answering everybody's questions that they have for us. So, and we've been running about 3 hours. We'll run a little longer if we need to, but that's kind of the mark that makes it work for us and our families and our ability to function the next day. So that's kind of where we've been at. Svan, are you ready to take them back into the poem?
Absolutely.
All right.
We start in section 37. Freyr married Gerður, daughter of Gymir. A certain man was called Gymir. And bear in mind the usage of the word man, meaning of the stock. It's not a human, but of that group. And they clarify this in the next line. But I just found some of the writing very interesting in this part. A certain man was called Gymir, and his wife, Aurboda. She was of the stock of the hill giants. Their daughter was Gerður. Couple of things, just right in that first sentence. In Germanic languages, the masculine man is applied to all people of the folk. So, like if something is public, it's allemaður, it's all it's for all the men, mankind, and it so in an essence, the masculine shares with the totality, and the feminine has its own unique derivative. Uh, some people also think that our boda is angr boda. That is not the case. Our means to shape. It has connotations to the earth and to mud. Another name for Ymir is Aurjelmur, or the shaper, the yeller of clay, or the yeller of um, soil, and it also can just apply to crafting, shaping. So there is that, and of the stock of the hill giants, a lot of people get really caught up on Alvar, Disir, Nornir, and it is very confusing, to be honest. The way that the language being translated was understood versus how we see it now. But the Old Norse that's mentioned is Berkrisur. Now, Jotuns are varied and enigmatic in many different ways. I know that some people try to lump all Jotuns to Ymir, and that's not the case. We have Niflheim, Muspelheim, Jotuns there. Then we have Ymir and his descendancy. And then from his descendancy, there is variation that happens after Bergelmir, Mountain Yeller. And there are generally, it's seen as Jotuns as a general term. Then there are Risi, which has connotations to mountain. So size, strength, and stone staying for long. And then there's Thursur. Thursur is most likely the source of where we get the word troll. And troll is about as definitive as the word monster. If I was to say, this person was a monster, or if I was to say there's a monster in the woods, it's not highly definable. And so we do have words comparative in our own language, but Risir are definitively connected to the land and definitively connected to mountains, and could lend to the idea of them being large. And in essence, they're referring that the gods perhaps were seen as large, that the gods are larger than regular humans, and by their coupling with the Risi or the Risir, it is that there's a balancing or parallel in size, but we don't usually have any definitive works that says, oh, the gods were seen by our ancestors as human sized, or just larger than humans, or as big as mountains. And I think that our ancestors saw them as the possibilities of all of those. But clearly, this descendancy comes from the middle world of the mountain, of the land of Midgard, and not from Niflheim, and not from Muspelheim. I felt like I needed to say that, but as we go.
So while we have a break for just one sec, I want to thank Gilbert for his $150 donation to Phrasehoff. Thank you, Gilbert. We appreciate you. He's another weekly giver on this program, and we genuinely are so grateful for his donation.
Perfect timing too, as we are talking about the Holy Lord, Freyr, and the the big point of this is that the story is giving abbreviated account, and the necessity of keeping it in the forefront. This is one of the major poems brought forth, spoken to King Gylfir. And that's, I think, also kind of important. The fact that she is, or this section is specifically brought up and ends the total of this section is, I think, interesting. And it's pretty weighty, the amount. So a certain man named Gymir and his wife Aurboda were of the stock of the Bergriser, or the hill giants. Their daughter was Gerður, who was the fairest of all women. It chanced one day that Freyr had gone to Hlidskjalf, that is the precipice of battle. It can be kind of seen as like a balcony, or a perhaps a peninsula of stone where Lord Odin sits, and gazed all over the world. But when he looked over into the northern region, he saw an estate, a house great and fair, and towards this house went a woman. When she raised her hands and opened the door before her, brightness gleamed from her hands, both over the sky and the sea, and all the worlds were illuminated by her. Thus, his overweening pride in having presumed to sit in the holy seat was avenged upon him, that he went away full of sorrow. When he had come home, he spoke not, he slept not, he drank not, no man dared speak to him. Then his father, Njardr, summoned to him Skirnir, one of the elevated, Freyr's foot page, and bade him to go to Freyr and beg speech of him, and ask for whose sake he was so bitter that he would not speak with the other gods. But Skirnir said he would go, albeit unwillingly, and said that evil answers were to be expected of Freyr. So the translations here are kind of missing the mark. As we talked earlier in other VNS episodes about illness, or what ill and evil, and the different classifications of what marked evil, what he was most likely saying was either untrue answers, as he would hide his feelings, or that he would deceive Skirnir because ultimately he was not supposed to sit on Hlidskjalf. And that's kind of not focused in on in this section. But we also have beauty standards are mentioned from her hands, and in the poems elsewhere in the Eddas, it says her hands and her arms shine brightly. Again, this is a reference to the whiteness, paleness of her skin, also the ruddiness of farmers, or the ruddiness of folk who worked the land. This was, again, a beauty standard of the time, that if a woman had white arms, it was because she was not needed to farm the land. She was of a high station. So Skirnir goes, but when he came to Freyr, straightway he asked why Freyr was downcast and spoke not with men. Then Freyr answered and said that he had seen a fair woman, and for her sake he was so full of grief that he would not live long if he were not to obtain her. And now thou shalt go and woo her on my behalf, and have her hither, whether her father will or no. I will reward thee well for it. So a couple of things there. One, the ultimate point of this, he goes and sits upon the all-seeing seat. And what he finds is not the things that Lord Odin searches for. He sees his other half, the circular nature, and it immediately connects him. But they're not connected, so there's a great sorrow. Now, at the time of in Old Norse society, the way that this worked, especially in Iceland, was if there were movements, courtship or courting a woman was not like it was done today. Oftentimes, you would send a friend over to even ask for the ability to speak and kind of orbit towards the woman, because it was a very dangerous society. And, her father and her brothers were always kind of around. And so you would send a friend, and that friend, if they were hurt, that was a crime. If you were a lowly born person and you attempted to gain the favor of a woman's father, he could take that as an insult, but he couldn't if it was done by a friend. So that's another point where I see a lot of modern folks try to, they modernize things without understanding context. He is fitting completely within an understanding of the time. But again, on top of all of this, the gods are being greatly euhemerized right now in the story. And we have spoken, I think, at length about how of the gods as they are forces, not actual people or humans or stuck specifically to one time frame. But that's clearly how the story is going to be contextualized. And I think that, when other holy books say this is the absolute truth, and then they speak from the context of the time, one, they're being dishonest with the whole truth part, and then two, they damn themselves. So he says, Skirnir answers back, he would go on this errand, but Freyr should give him his own sword, which is so good that it fights on its own. And Freyr did not refuse, but gave him the sword. Then Skirnir went forth and wooed the woman for him, and received her promise. And 9 nights later, she was to come to a place called Bari, or the grove in the woods, and then go to the bridal with Freyr. So they were to meet and then go and be brought into union. But when Skirnir told Freyr his answer, then he sung this prose. Long is one night, long is the second. How can I wait thou 3? Often a month to me seemed less than this one night of waiting. And so we have very, I would say, Shakespearean levels of kind of love and yearning, showing, again, those signs of what was popular or acceptable culturally at the time, that Lord Freyr is yearning for her, and he cannot wait 3 nights. I find it very, very beautiful and poetic and telling. And again, it is so much so that we forget the fact that these are gods and not young people working through all of these kind of marital norms. A lot of people get very upset at this story, but realizing that Lord Freyr is the god of the return of spring, and he's bringing in through Skirnir, whose name means ray of light, he's bringing in the cold earth and opening her up. So this was to blame for Freyr's being that's interesting as a misspell. Freyr being weaponless when he fights Belli and has to slay him with the horn of a hart, a deer. And again, the mural, I really emphasize this with the empty scabbard and his holding aloft a weaponized deer horn. Then Gangleri said, "'Tis much to be wondered at that such a great chief as Freyr would give away his sword, not having another equally good. It was a great privation to him. When he fought with him, called Belli, by my faith, he must have rued that gift, must have been upset that he had to give up his sword to fight Belli. There was small matter in that when he and Belli met, Freyr could have killed him with his hand. It should come to pass that Freyr will think a worse thing to come upon him when he misses his sword on that day, and that the sons of Muspel go a-harrying." Again, the word harry, as in the English sense, to attack or to raid. We see it in the word, like the Vikings harried the coast of England. But in this case, there is no mention as to exactly why the sword is gone. Skirnir goes there, arranges things, but there's never any mention fully of the sword having to be sacrificed or sacrificed at their wedding, or given to the hill giant, the Bergriser. All it is that the significance is, in order to make this union, in order to create this cycle where the prolific warmth and that which grows and spring and all of it requires both the masculine and the feminine, the willful masculine bringing the cold feminine into giving, and it required him to sacrifice a great part of him, that sword, that would ultimately affect the gods later. And I think theologically we could look at it as there is this great sacrifice of the virility of defense of the gods that Lord Frey has in order to build a more perfect place here in Midgard with the correct cycles of spring. And
something we often talk about or mention this in the context of is our ritual of charming the plow at Disething. The symbolism of the plow breaking into the cold earth, digging a furrow, and the seed being planted in the unyielding earth. It has a lot of lessons and a lot of inspiration for us. The idea of the willed masculine force of creativity making a place for itself in a world that is unyielding, in a nature that's unyielding, cutting a path, digging a hole, breaking ground on something to build and to do, planting seeds biologically and conceptually in the world around us to grow into the things that we want. It is literally a triumph of the will. And I think that is a really important piece of imagery of that assertion of masculine dominance, of circumstance, of nature, of the world around us to put chaos to order and to bring about purpose. And so, the very clearly phallic and phallic imagery behind the plow is definitely at play in that. I'd like to break here and answer some questions because I think it fits the mold better. The next several sections are going to be about the Einherjar and about Valhalla, and I think we should probably handle that as a chunk. So I'm going to go back to a couple of things here and take care of some questions. First one, how do I join? Like to be able to go to moots, meet people, get involved. Is it with the monthly subscription on the website? Yes, that's exactly how you join. Is you click the join link on the website, you read through a couple of things, you agree to a couple of things, and then you begin with your donation contributions. Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward process, but if there's any questions or if anybody is curious, please reach out to any of us or any of our folk builders and they can talk to you about it. But yeah, joining, we would encourage everyone listening to the sound of my voice, either now or in the future, to join the Asatru Folk Assembly. It's awesome to talk about this. It's great to ponder it and to think about it and to dream on it, but it's even better to do it and to do it with your fellow Asatru who are engaged in the same struggles that you are and hope to share the same triumphs with you. So we'd love to have you with us. Now is the time. If you're considering or you're sitting on the fence, time to get off the fence and get on the team. We got awesome things we're doing and we'd love to have you with us. The next question, this one is for you specifically. I was looking up the medicinal. Oh, okay, yeah. So it was asked last week. I mentioned something on it, but I was like, we need Svan to chime in. This is from Celine. I was looking up the medical purposes of the herbs used at Nornanot and wondered, do they have any magical significance / correlation to the ritual bloat performed, especially in relation to the feminine, as I noticed that most of them do help with feminine reproductive health problems?
Yeah, but I can imagine if you go and look at from that perspective, it would be very confusing. They're kind of all over the place medicinally. But let's consider the administration of the herb. It's done through smoke. So the way that I kind of look at leechcraft is that it's how it is administered that affects the various things. So if you look at the plants, each one of them has a lot of medicinal things. A valerian root for sleep, but you would do it through a tea. Sage has lots of different properties, from cleaning the liver and cleaning the blood, and you can do it through eating it or through drinking a tea from it. But the most important point of the herbs is actually the standpoint against the evil eye and curses, and what would ultimately be the point of the ceremony is, like there are troll in the masculine sense, there's also the feminine sense of the troll witch and the wild outer field of society. When we look at, and I think I talked a little bit about it maybe 2 episodes back or 2 times back that I was on, Tomato Europe having the feminine kind of in the form of the witch and the hag being past her childbearing days, and they would find themselves in these kind of outer fringe. That wasn't really necessarily the case in Germanic, and you could say it's because it's cold and everybody's kind of needed and things like that. And once a woman had children, she was kind of a mother of everyone. So you don't necessarily see a physical witch or hag, but still what remains is the feminine troll just as much as the masculine troll. And it stays even in Iceland after Christianization. There is clear differentiations between the masculine troll and the feminine troll and the feminine powers, because the gods are gendered and we are a reflection of divinity. So we're gendered. So is to the darker nature of the wilds. So what it kind of goes towards is the masculine troll, the masculine kind of negative forces is one that you would physically have to worry about. I don't know, if you enter and you disappear, or it's like you get a rock thrown at you in a way. Kind of very simple and straightforward. The feminine troll of it is the curse, the being kind of altered or changed, and so it has a much more I think subtle point. And those herbs were specifically chosen in the idea of going against evil, more feminine style magic, where there is the curse or the baleful twisting of fate. And so that's why they're administered through smoke, and that's why the smoke is laid upon the body, is a protective measure in that sense. But each of those herbs has medicinal properties in many different ways for many different reasons on their own. This one is far more religious and metaphysical.
All right. Also from Celine, can you talk about hell and how we as Asatru can appropriately venerate her? Svan, would you like to take that first?
Sure. I think that one of the things that's worth noting for all folk who are Asatru is understanding the dichotomy of mythical movement. We see the children of the Kinslayer, and the least dangerous one is placed farthest away. And she's clearly the stasis throne. And we talked about the tripartite and how the thrones apply kind of across the board. She takes the stasis throne and is given that position specifically by Lord Odin. And we see Jormungandr, he's the kind of catalytic position. And then Fenrir is brought right into heaven. The most dangerous one is brought there. This movement in the story is not accidental. But what ends up happening specifically with her is that she is given task of holding over and keeping in that place the souls of the dead. And a lot of people get the whole up-down thing wrong. Christianity kind of makes it like up is good, down is bad. Even though early Christianity didn't even have a down, it was just earth and up. So technically They were viewing it as we were living in the bad place. That slowly changed because as European Christians went, they're still Europeans. And so the faith is in their blood. They applied the Trinity. They apply the triplicate world, and they just miscued these things about good and bad. So in this place, it is misty. It is hard to define. Time moves slowly. This is all done in mythical language, where the people move slowly. It is far away from the gods, as the gods are the gods of order, and as it is far away from them, it is less confined by those rules. And this is done on purpose. As the forces of chaos and law battle, the safe place of the soul, and specifically of the soul of Balder, are kept in the mystery of the undefinable of, and the hard to kind of pin down place of the cosmos, so that they can be protected, like placing a seed deep into the earth, or wondering where the wellspring comes from. It's that all of that kind of mystery is being placed in the story as it's being told in its way. So she is given stewardship over the souls of the folk and over the soul of Balder and Nanna. So there's a lot going on in that. So there's not necessarily a negative look upon her, but there's also not a glorification of death, because she fills a role that has been deeply conflicting in Aryan societies. The word holy, the word whole, to be complete. And she is a diffuser of wholeness. She is the necessary. So I wouldn't say that there's reverence. I would say that there's certainly honoring, because she is the necessary part of a cycle. And there is the filtration as well. When the ancestors gather there and they look across the bridge, and again, the bridge is mentioned as being wide and covered, so that it will be long standing. Unlike the bridge to heaven is fiery and shimmers and can disappear. So access into the upper world is not given to everyone. But for death is open to all who draw breath. And at that point, if you are deemed by the ancestors unworthy, you are then separated from the line that you are actually connected to right now in the living sense. And so you get severed, and you have to cross the river Gjöll, which survives in English language with the word yelp. So it's the river of mournful cries is how I've translated it. And then Slither, the cruel river, kind of rends the soul apart, and they get to the other side of the river, and there they are no longer themselves. They are completely disconnected from the collective of their bloodlines. It's so important to be connected, and to be separated, especially willfully separated, was seen as absolutely a woeful situation. And it is. People just don't think about that nowadays, and kind of have this whole, I'm going to go off and do my own thing, or I can be an island unto myself, which is usually a learning process. But at that point, we see the ancestors are kind of kept in her dominion. She is the breaker of all things that must be broken down. And so in a way, she is a Nornir. She is an element of divinity and time, but she is also timeless. Again, there's the dichotomy of the half and half with her. And she is brought in by Lord Odin to steward the souls and keep them there. And what a lot of people forget is they, first they get caught up on the whole dark imagery, the snakes and the poison and all of these things. Well, to our ancestors, death was cold. Death was like it is today, kind of seen as scary. I know that many of us can come to terms with it, but it is still mysterious and undefinable. And that the imagery of venomous snakes, it's not about literalism. It's about an understanding that an adder could bite you and you die. You eat a plant and you die. It was the rationale of understanding that sometimes dying was not held in leagues with everything you were accomplishing in life. It was on its own timetable. It is on its own timetable. And that's also by proxy her. And you'll notice too in the Eddas and in the sagas, her name is used synonymously with death itself. So sending someone to hell, sending them on the road to hell, we're referring to they were going to battle and they were going to kill these people. Their time here was dwindling. So ultimately, I think from the church's total perspective is we don't celebrate death and we don't celebrate the breaking down of wholeness, but to be noble is to understand and observe the world and the truths around you. And that is inevitable. That is often necessary. And as Lord Odin designs, as he understood, it was imperative to keeping the future of the gods and the folk for the next turn through Ragnarok. So with that, there's more of a sense of honor, not so much reverence.
Yeah, I'm less prickly about that than a lot of our people. I think that why matters. I think that and specific to this poem, when we mention the Aesir, the 12 that are listed, and when we mention the Ausinnur, specifically the two great Ausinnur, Freya and Frigg, but also the Maidens of Fensaler, it's good for us to worship them. You should worship them. That's kind of a proactive default setting of should. Other deities and things, the question comes to, why? What is your purpose? What are you doing? And I think that requires an answer. So I've seen very appropriate honoring of hell with people at funerals or people who've lost loved ones that want for their loved ones to be well treated in the afterlife. Those things all make sense and are a very reasonable thing to do. I've seen far more people that just want to do dark, spooky goth stuff. And it sounds silly, and I don't mean to belittle it. I don't think that they necessarily think that they're silly doing it. But it's the honest answer, is that's why they're doing it is because they're in that spooky goth phase of their spiritual discovery, and that's what they want to do. I think that's something you have to be a little bit careful of doing, and it's important. I think the general taboo or idea that you don't want to invite death into something that's healthy and vibrant, you don't want to inject that into an otherwise unrelated place, makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's cause to set yourself against or be opposed or in opposition to hell. But again, it's different to, build a reciprocal relationship and to nourish that. And I think it's kind of just something to be very cautious about. And it's certainly not something that we do in a formal way as the Asatru Folk Assembly, but it's not, it's not wrong, but it's certainly got an asterisk of why, and make sure your intention matches. And there's a general caution against inviting in or dealing with things that you don't understand. And there's kind of safe waters of the gods that are explicitly there to be in a worship relationship with the folk as a beneficial relationship that is prescribed to you by your elders, by the Gothar, by your ancestors. And then venturing outside of that into some of these things that are peripheral to it require a certain degree of understanding and caution. And I think that's kind of the case here. So I think the why is a good question. I think being honest with yourself, because here's the other thing, aside from, Matt said that I was just being edgy and a goth, well, I'll show him. I've had conversations with people that, will honestly admit, like, yeah, that's kind of what I was doing. So again, you don't have to run it by me or get a I told you so or whatever, but consider, is that why you're doing it, or do you have another purpose? And I think that's worth considering. The next question from Jill: in your experience, what are the most common self-inflicted mistakes that prevent apprentice folk builders from progressing? Svan, what are your thoughts towards that?
I think getting disheartened by the day-to-day. I know you've mentioned kind of seeing how things are made or seeing how the inner workings are can be very disheartening from the more romanticized look of things. But at the end of the day, there is that balance of mystical might and keeping the lights on. And a lot of people don't like to address the lights part. And so I think a lot of times, or they get disheartened by the fact that they hold a moot and maybe no one shows up. Maybe one person shows up. And I have always seen that in the long run, it has turned around. There was no one in the area, and then a year later, there's an overabundance, and there's people showing up locally and getting involved. So I think that's that's the one thing is disheartening. Whatever it's disheartening you can vary, but keeping at it and maintaining the horizon, I think, is the answer to that. I saw a question come in the queue, and I have a book. It's not near me. I'm gonna go grab it because I don't want people to think I'm making stuff up. This is for something, a totally different question, but I'm gonna go grab it now.
All right. So, Jill, and guys, this is a little bit of inside baseball, but I think that it is applicable to other situations. So the self-inflicted mistakes, big one is not, well, there's a couple. I can think of like three right now. So the big one, I would say, is not being in regular participating communication with your colleagues. We have ongoing, like 24/7 chat on Teams with our leadership in general, separated by district, and different ones for different purposes. But interacting regularly with your fellow folk builders, with the Gothar, is really, really important because it builds the necessary relationships to be successful for the long term. And this is true with Asatru in general. It is about your folk and community and doing things together and being part of a connected web, a kin fence of your compatriots and whatever you're doing. Building those relationships, even if it's stupid and silly, mundane conversation, keeps you fresh in each other's mind. It reinforces the bonds of friendship and of team with the people you work with. And it builds the relationships that sustain you when times are tough and strengthens the others when the times may be tough for them. So building those relationships and having, daily interaction with your fellow leaders on teams is the key. I guess not doing that would be the mistake I see people make. Another one is getting discouraged by swinging for the fences on gatherings and then being resentful and upset if people don't show up to them. This is a marathon and not a sprint. And Mandy and I were trying to get people to join us at the Pickle Festival here this last weekend, and nobody showed up. It happens to all of us. But sometimes an apprentice folk builder will, I got a great idea for a moat. We'll get together and we'll have, I'm going to lay out a bunch of money for food and for drinks and for a venue and for stuff. And then no one shows up and there's a resentment there. Don't do that. Keep it simple until you have people committed to something, and then you can scale up. Keep it simple and realize it's a marathon and not a sprint. There was another one that was kind of top of my mind a second ago, and I'm kind of spacing it now that I see as a common thing that prevents maximal success that way. So, all right, I'll mention it if it comes to me, but that's what I can see off the top of my head that are really important ones. Next question from Caleb. Do Hoffs charge any kind of a fee to hold a wedding there for two members? Can weddings be held at times other than our holy tides and gatherings? Glad you asked that. No, we don't charge any kind of a fee to perform religious services to our folk. Sometimes people will donate or will give us money as a courtesy on that. But no, those things aren't something we charge a fee for. The other question, yes, you can get. Not only can you, but it's highly encouraged that you do set up times outside of the major gatherings to host, to hold your wedding. There's a plus side to doing it at a gathering because a lot of other AFA members will be there, but it's no different than how any other group of people chooses to have their wedding. It is optimal in my mind to do it on a time where the focus can be on you and your spouse, to where you can have your wedding the way you would like, to where the whole day or the whole event is about you and your spouse and your marriage. And so that can be the focus. So yes, we would encourage that to be the case. So absolutely. And thank you for asking the question. Um, may pick and choose a little bit on the questions here while we wait for Svan to get back. Um, as to Monk and your comment about hell, so is it wrong to leave offerings because you're grateful for them taking care of your loved ones? No, because I think, like I said earlier, that is a very specific purpose, and I don't think that's wrong at all. Because I think your intent is very clear, and I think when there is a solid intention, it puts you in a better position to, I don't know if be protected is the right word, but to be confident and secure in what you're doing and the purpose that you're doing it for. And so I don't think that that is wrong. We have another question, and I think we're optimally poised for that. Mandy, come here for 1 second. Ditto, come here. Come here. Oh. We're asked when Ditto is going to make another appearance. Here he is. Some of you may notice obnoxious tippy tap noises in the background when I'm speaking from time to time. That's you. Mandy and I are very excited to have wood floors and to not have carpet. We did not anticipate that dog toenails are thunderous in our house, that we don't have a whole lot of stuff on the walls just yet as we're moving in, and as we listen to him run throughout the house and echo. Thus, we have these. He's got little sock things that he has to wear at night so that we are not kept up all night by his little feet noises. Here you go, bud. Oh, oh, oh. All right. So Svan, our next.
I was kind of laughing. I didn't find the book, and I imagine that some people in the audience probably think I have like some sort of end of the Indiana Jones movie, like warehouse box or some sort of weird, like
I hope at least you have one of those ladders that's on the wheels.
Yes. I was thinking that as I was looking. No, we had construction done, and I had to break down my bookcase. So in reality, the only reason why it took long was because everything is discombobulated, stacked on top of each other, behind, in voluminous pillars, and no, I couldn't find it, but I will nonetheless find it on the internet so that people can find it themselves.
In the meantime, Svan, can you tell us about the Zu rune, and is it related to Tyr? How are the medieval runes used in magic and healing, and how are they different than the other rune sets, especially the Elder Futhark?
The Zu rune. Okay. Well, one, that's very interesting because the medieval rune set that most everybody thinks about is later Nordic period. And sometimes they're simplified staff runes. And that's generally the medieval runes. The reason why I was running to get the book is because there is another medieval Futhark that no one ever talks about and is only mentioned in one book that it's by Nigel Pennick, and I will say the name of the book once I find it. He does talk about the German Futhark that has the wolf angle and the Erdra rune, which is the Othal rune with the feet. And he very, very unbiasedly talks about how this was already established in medieval Germany. It was part of their heraldic systems. Any political parties that took any of these runes later on, they did it because they were uniquely German in their traditions. there was no co-opting. There was no like sneakiness. They're sneaking into Scandinavia and taking these runes to use. No, these were already established in their Germanic traditions. And the strange thing about that Futhark is there's only, I believe, 14 runes listed. And that's another thing, is the younger Futhark had 16. And the medieval ones that most people are referred to when you look up medieval runes is going to be the short staff or simple staff, Swedish, Danish variations of the younger Futhark. So with that, I was also trying to figure, and I'm almost positive it doesn't, the German one does not have a ZU rune. And I was just making sure, I was kind of panicking on the inside. Okay. So we have is this the Anglo-Saxon because once we start moving in, the classification of runes get very strange if you understand the Elder Futhark is classified in two groups. There's the Kelverstone Elder Futhark and the Vat Stenabrekteat Futhark. And those are the oldest Futharks that we have. And then we have Anglo-Saxon. But Anglo-Saxon is the oldest one that we have with poems. A lot of people are surprised to find out that the Anglo-Saxon rune poems are actually older than the Old Norse rune poems.
She says it's from the Gothic.
Oh, from the Gothic. Now, so in the Gothic Futhark, TU, it's TIU. And the only reason why I know that is in relation to Ulfilas, he was a Goth or Guten who was trying to convert his people to Christianity, specifically Arian Christianity, which believed that Jesus was a mortal man. He wrote the book of Matthew, and he utilized Gothic runes and he wrote them out, but he used Greek grammar, and the TU did not look like that. So that's interesting. And that's another thing we have to kind of tackle, is there's certain sense of misinformation kind of floating around, which is why I was so concerned with making sure that we clarify where everything is. That rune that you just showed, Nick, looks very, very similar to the Anglo-Saxon.
Yes, it's the ear rune in the Anglo-Saxon Futhark.
I'll say, if it's wrong, I'm blaming Matt. I don't know.
Well, and that just proves a point about how things can get very muddled. And then, like, to look up the Futhark with the wolf angle, because that was one of the most interesting things. We have Othala with the feet, and we have the wolf angle. Still, nothing comes up. But Nigel Pennick, who is a very influential runester, he's kind of, he was always kind of more of in the background, I think, but not as upfront as other people. Very, very solid in his work. And he was the one that I first heard about, this heraldric Futhark that was kind of utilized and eventually led to the wolf angle being utilized during World War II and the Othala rune, or the Erdra rune, but that it was from 17th century Germany or 16th century. So when we say medieval, that's where I was kind of like, which one? However, let's just assume one of the things, there are two runes throughout all the Futharks, and one of them is the Tiu, Teu, Tir, and the other is the Kon, Kenaz, Keen. And again, remember, Kenaz is a reconstructed word utilizing all of the formats to kind of go back to the source. Those two letters specifically, the K sound and the T sound, are in all the Futharks. And I really focus in on the Anglo-Saxon, specifically because there were some people on the internet trying to justify that that Lord Tyr is not a god and that he has no heavenly correlations, and they're trying to jam him very disrespectfully into a box. And the oldest rune poem that we have clearly states Tu is the North Star. And this was part of that process of the tripartite and of me coming to understand through observation about stasis and dynamicism and catalysm, and the stasis representation of the North Star. So clearly there's a celestial tie there. We don't have a lot of meaning behind the runes outside of the rune poems. We have, going all the way back to the Gothic language as he wrote it, pulling the runes that were in use, but until the rune poems, we have very little understanding of meaning until we get to those. And then
I want to add something. There's with the rune poems. So we don't have enough information to have a real clear picture of various magical schools, medieval uses of runes. When you look up medieval runes, there's a number of different things. So it really depends. In medieval Scandinavia, they're using the Younger Futhark. In early medieval Anglo-Saxon England, they're using the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. In continental magical traditions, they're using some of the ones that become house signs and things like the wolf's angle that Svan's talking about. It all kind of depends. Zeolinguistically goes back to Tyr and is certainly related to Tyr. It develops in the Anglo-Saxon Futhark in terms of writing and language and needing to have letters to accomplish linguistic developments. So I'm sure that there are magical elements people put to it, but I think the primary innovation in that sense and at that time period was linguistic development. But I'll say this: in the mnemonic rune poems, it talks about ear in terms of death. And like the corpse and laying the corpse in the grave. And the strange correlation that occurs to me as it relates to the Tyr rune is that that's the rune in the Armanen system that correlates to the rune song about necromancy, about, you know, the hanged man coming down from his noose and speaking when you compel him with that song. So that's the little bit of connectivity that I've seen, other than it's a Tyr rune with wings on it. That's about the best I think we've got on such an obscure thing. Svan, do you have more?
I was just going to say, the book is called The Complete Illustrated Guide to the Runes by Nigel Pennick. It is a great book for anybody who is interested in runic history and understanding all aspects of runic perspectives, and he covers them all very cleanly and provides massive amounts of photos. It's really, really a good book. But I would also say, too, the interesting thing, the Anglo-Saxon rune poems are the oldest, coming from the 10th century, and then the Norwegian and the Icelandic coming from the 11th, or the 10th and the 11th, respectively. There's huge gaps of time and huge gaps of land, and yet they are well, at least the Icelandic and Anglo-Saxon ones are remarkably close to each other. No internet, no mail service. This was clearly passed on and kept in connectivity. The Norwegian ones, I like them. They're more of what I kind of jokingly refer to as Zen-like, as in the way that they're structured leaves a lot more to question and ponder about because of they're so minimalistic. But still, the huge expanse of time, huge distances, and we have runic traditions being focused on. And so that leaves us to only, we can only look at the evidence and presume, going back, all the way back to the Goths, to the Gutens, and throughout the Germanic people, there clearly was magical traditions spread and carried on, formulated, and cared about, nurtured by the culture, and clearly had connective meanings all the way through, and that would then lend the holy god Tyr is present in every one of those runes.
We're an hour and 19 in, and we've gone through one little section, but this, as we do on this show, it's kind of that the lore itself is a conversation starter and something for us to take and go through as long as we want, because it brings up points that are relevant to our practice and that answer people's questions. And so something I want to mention here while we're on runes: language, both written and spoken, is inherently magical. That's why, as a subtle form of low magic, being very intentional with your speech has a power to it. And it's a power that circumvents logical barriers and filters and just ingrains thoughts through particular word choice or through embedding ideas and concepts over time. Speaking or writing brings things from the world of the imagination or the internal, and it inserts them into the world around us. It manifests them in a way and makes at least the concept real. We get that kind of dual purpose in the schools of magical stuff are enchantment, literally chanting or speaking things into existence, singing. I spoke earlier about Odin's rune songs, and written spells like rune work and the sigil magic that our runes represent. This is one of the myriad reasons that I take linguistics really seriously. And I think, though it is very slow going, my efforts to learn Icelandic / Old Norse is fruitful, because it does calibrate you to receive the lore in a different way, to understand it in a deeper way, and to connect with the context of it in a very particular way. So language matters, and I think that runic understanding is a part of that, and it's worth mentioning. So on books and things, from Frank, my wife, who still considers herself a Christian, has agreed to read a book about Asatru. What book do you recommend that I have her read? Svan, for somebody who I'm assuming from this is unfamiliar and has finally relented to all right, if this is so important to you, I'll read something. So I'm not going to read all this stuff, but if you've got one book, I'll read it. What should I read?
That's a tough one.
Don't mess it up, or you're gonna destroy Frank's marriage.
No. Well, because I'm trying to think of all of the books that are out there. I mean, and again, I know this sounds like kind of a default, but Founder McNallen's book, Asatru, a native European spirituality, I think is important because it addresses something that other books don't, and that is the necessity of understanding metagenetic bloodline connectivity. Other books don't touch it, or they completely go against it, even though they know it's true and it applies to other people, but they can't let it apply to us because of their political standings. So I think that's a key component. It doesn't break down our faith into components that are super understandable. What it does is I think it shows the brick and the mortar, not the individual bricks. When you get into certain other books, there are points where they dissect each section and very clearly show them, and perhaps even go into them further. I think a lot of Dr. Flowers' stuff in his early days, like the Book of Troth and all of that, but also too, those books have a tendency to be a little bit more geared towards academic research or what have you. I feel like Founder McNallen's book gives brick, mortar, and brick of every single thing that you can understand. Instead of long, over grandiose and metaphysical descriptions about the soul, the learning at the end of that is we believe in the soul, we believe in the multifaceted soul, and that each component is important. It is the quick, clean, broad overview that I think is really, really important for somebody coming from the outside.
Well, so not trying to steal your answer, that's immediately what came to mind.
Right.
You guys may notice on this show, it's always one of my guests that mentions Asatru, a Native European spirituality by our founder, Steve McNallen. I rarely recommend that book, not because I don't think it's good and I don't think people should read it, but it's intended for a really particular way, and it's usually not the most direct answer to the question that I'm being asked. In this case, I think it's the perfect answer.
Right.
So, I think everybody should read the Trulagmal that's on our website. We're working on getting physical copies of it. That is what we do in a detailed, this is what the AFA believes. Steve's book talks substantially about what we believe. But more important to this particular case, it walks you through the process of, why do this instead of stay in, you mentioned your wife's case that she considers herself a Christian. Why stay in whatever you're currently doing and come to Asatru, come home to Asatru? Why Asatru is in fact your spiritual home. And it walks through Steve's kind of foundational journey of why he set the modern iteration of our faith into motion. And I think that's a very, very good introduction specifically for your wife's case. So I second Svan's recommendation on that one. Also, while we are on the topic of books, from Mary, Matt, and Svan. Last week, there were some book recommendations mentioned, one of which was The Rune Workshop, Can you please repeat these recommendations, especially noting whether Rune Workshop is the book The Rune Workshop by Jennifer Halls? So that's an easy miss here. It wasn't the Rune Workshop, it was the Rune Workbook. And Rune Workbook is by Leon D. Wild. I'm not familiar with Jennifer Hall's book. That could be amazing. It could not be. I have no familiarity with that. But the one I was recommending is the Rune Workbook by Leon Wild. And that was a very simple rune book that I kind of recommend to people who aren't familiar, who it's like their first taste of like, what is this? Or to like a younger audience, to, you know, a child. And I don't mean like a little kid, but like, you know, junior high or after, that I think is a really good introduction. I can't speak to what Bodie or Trent may have recommended. I think, if I recall, they recommended Myths and Symbols of Pagan Europe by H.E. Davidson. I'd say any of her works are a really good thing to read. I believe Svan, did she write Road to Hell?
She did write A Road to Hell.
Road to Hell is a really good and often overlooked book. Just anybody listening, Road to Hell is a really good book. You should read it. I think there's a lot there, and anything that she writes, I think, is really good. The ones I mentioned were Futhark, Rune Lore, and Alu, A-L-U, by I think it's called Alu, An Operative Guide to Runology, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look. All three of those are by Dr. Stephen Flowers, or his pen name, Ed Thorson. Those are really good for runic understanding. He is my go-to source. I think he is the preeminent rune master of all time, outside of the Allfather himself. I say that, I know that is a bold claim. While I don't think he was raised in the living runic tradition of some of the rune masters of old, he has spent his entire adult life immersed in the academic understanding of runes, in the magical implementation of using them, and he has studied the depth and breadth of all available living knowledge of runes in a way that has a scope that our ancestors didn't have access to. So, I'm not recommending him for lifestyle choice or for a variety of different things. I do recommend heeding his counsel as far as runes go. This one's an interesting one. I'll let you go first on this, from Ron, for both of you. If you could have a national event at the site of the old Uppsala temple, which holy day would you have it for, and why?
Freyfaxi. And I don't know if he... Adam of Bremen was actually there, and there were some cases where he was attempting to describe things, but also kind of like, yeah, this is what they do, but it's also really bad. There was some propaganda motivation there, but he did speak of the priests of Freyr wearing bells upon their belts. At Freyr's he's wearing bells upon his belt. And I just think that Holy Frey returning back to the soil of his bloodline, the Englingur people, I think would be really good. I also think that there are some considerations to the idea that the euhemerization of Holy Freyr isn't just a technique, but that perhaps he came down to Midgard to guide the people there, like a King Arthur, if you will, as the king is connected to the land, and that he may have also influenced the Anglo-Saxons even before they came to the island. As is mentioned, the great hero Shield Sheafing, the sheafing part, of course, being the wheat, and that's, I think, a good telling of that. So if there was in Asatru an avatar sense of the divine coming down to guide mortals in a mortal form that's even kind of historically remembered, it would certainly be Holy Freyr. And he is the Vraltagodur. He's the god of the world. He's, his connection, all the Vanir that come to the Aesir and join them and become one, they are still deeply connected to the middle world. And he has such a unique, poetic, and beautiful sense. And I just think it would be amazing for his faith, his cult of worship, to be reestablished in the heartland of Sweden. That would be amazing.
So I would do Disa thing, because I think that's likely the highest holy day that was celebrated there during our ancestors' time. So that's the one I would like to do if I only got one to do. That was also known as the thing of all the Swedes. It was the big gathering of the Swedish kingdom for their big festival. So that's the one that I would choose, just because that's kind of the big, at least going by the information we have, that's likely the big one that was celebrated there by the nation of the Sve at the time. Svan, what are your thoughts on looks maxing, clavicular, and beating your face with a hammer to grow bigger cheekbones?
Okay. Look maxing is kind of wild. I do think that there is some merit in the idea of working out your body, including perhaps parts you don't normally think that to work out, talking about wide palates to gain facial structure as we're losing them because we're eating softer foods. Before I was a barber, I was a chef, and I'm kind of I like entertaining all of that. I do think, however, it's becoming it's crossing a line, and that line is unseemly.
Heterosexuality?
Yes, it borders on this kind of a worship of the male to a point where it's like late Roman or late Greco period. And I think that especially in the media part of it, there is this hyper fascination of homosexuality with it. But if you were talking about that, and I've seen some people argue, oh no, it's the return of the masculine. I don't necessarily think that, because how it's framed, it's framed with kind of posturing in front of the camera. It's not framed with what men are supposed to be doing, and so you end up kind of getting it's like a deviation away, and what you end up kind of also going down the trail of vanity. I think it's youth worship. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Craig Ferguson. He ran a late night comedy show, and one of his monologues was about how our society has lost an understanding of growing older, and that wisdom, gaining the gray hairs in your beard, etc., has this classification. And so instead, we worship these kind of youthful, but then the youthful becomes infantile, and the people that do this are like in Hollywood, they're childlike brains that are easily swayed, etc. It's really, really good. But it's kind of on the same track with that. And I think it's missing the point completely. So again, bashing your face for cheekbone growth. One, there's the desire for cheekbone. I hate to break it to you, but Germanic, Nordic, if you look at the old books about like physiology of the races, we have flat cheekbones. So you're kind of you're trailing after a desire that's set. The other thing is agitation. I know a lot of guys talk about it with their hairline. If they agitate their hairline, they'll get growth. I think if you agitate any part of, as you work out, you're agitating your muscles. It's far better to focus on that than to focus on hitting your cheekbones to try to get them to grow. No, focus on agitating your muscles and working out and agitating your brain and thinking about deeper things and building towards that. It's ultimately navel gazing when it comes to doing this. Diet and working out will get you all the same results that smashing your face with a hammer or hitting your hairline with needles will get.
So, speaking of agitating one's brain, this agitates my brain. I am also agitated that reading such a ridiculous thing with such ridiculous terms, I knew exactly what he was talking about and asking about that.
Language is important. It's
to my great embarrassment. Yeah, I think that's really gay. I think it's gay and childish. And I mean, I think it's gay in like the just standard negative pejorative. And I think it's also gay and it's overtly homosexual. Yeah, it's just really gay. Like I'm trying to, like I could, there's a trend with our young men that I've seen. The more they remove themselves from living real lives in the real world in a normal, healthy way that's rooted in real existence, they go in these really strange, deviant ways. It's like this intentionally celibate thing, this incel thing, and then men go their own way. That way is called homosexuality. And then there's this like look maxing thing and the cheekbone, and it's really an unhealthy obsession with prettiness. It's just it's gross, and I'm more than kind of disgusted by it. The advice is like, hey guys, don't hit yourself in the face with a hammer. The people who are doing this and starting this phrase are not the people I'm going to discourage from doing that. So what I will say though, because I think the questions on here outside of me just making fun do require serious answers too. I think that your cheekbones, specifically like your orbital bone, is really easy to break and have bad problems with. There is science involved in toughening your bones. If you want to toughen up your bones rather than trying to make yourself have pretty cheekbones so you look good at the gay bar, you should probably punch there's a lot of martial art techniques in striking various degrees of hardened things like wood and even stone in some instances with one's knuckles. Again, I'm not, Victory Never Sleeps is not encouraging you to do this. I'm just saying it's a thing to where you can increase your the density of your bone structure in like your knuckles or on your shins. I know the Thai kickboxers will often do that. They'll toughen up by kicking different reed and bamboo and wooden posts to get stronger shin bones, or to run like wooden dowels and things up and down their shins to harden them. Like there's some degree of science to that. The obsession with trying to make yourself that pretty goes too far. And don't get me wrong, try to look good. Guys that are slobs and look like crap, stop that. Try to look your best. Try to present yourself well. But that level of hyperfixation on pruning and preening is really, it's very effeminate and gross. And if we are in a day and age where I don't think that if it's done to appeal to ladies, I think ladies that it appeals to aren't necessarily the ladies that you want to build life with. And I worry that it's to appeal to people who are not ladies. I think that whole thing, stay away from that. It's gross. Get out while you can. Sorry for the over focus on it. It's just disturbing. And I think we've got a lot of young men that need to get out. And again, as the kids say, they need to touch grass. They need to go like talk to a girl, go roughhouse, go do something, go dig a hole, go chop down a tree, go do something in the world. Question from Austin. Greetings all, and I hope you're having a great evening. So I've been trying to build a better relationship with the Landvatir who reside in a nature park close to where I live. However, a friend pointed out that those spirits of the land are quote unquote native, implying that I can't or shouldn't try to reach out to them because they belong to another race. Is that true? And does each race have their own land spirits? Thank you for any help and for all that you do. Svan, would you like to address that?
Colonize the land spirits. No, first off, the relationship that people have, the folk have a relationship with the land in their own unique way. If you've ever read, there's a really good book called God is Red. It's written by a indigenous North American, and he speaks about how the spirituality of the world is perceived within their capacity to perceive and measured based on that litmus. The same applies to us. And our capacity and what fits our understanding. I think that when you look at the spirits of the land and you build a relationship with them, you can perhaps take into consideration certain things. I do know of certain folk who may offer gifts in relation, like tobacco, for instance, and that's clearly a nod to that. But does it have to be? Absolutely not. Because remember, our eyes are in our head. And as we walk through the world, we see through our eyes. We can empathize, perhaps, or we could try to consider. But ultimately, it's still the reality is that it's our eyes. So if you deal with spirits, the other thing that's really kind of important to understand is most spiritual practices, especially with land spirits or earthly spirits, we get the information entirely built around a homogeneous society that considers hospitality in its own way, not considering anyone else's way. So you go forth having this relationship with the Landvatir, and that's the beauty of the spirit and the divine. They know the framework of the living, the fleshed mortal. And so you go where your feet go, you interact in the same rules that are correct for your people. I think one of the more tragedies is that our folk have lost any sense of respect in that. It's an exchange. It's not a worship, which is kind of what a lot of New Age people try to make it seem. But also, too, our ancestors of Abrahamic faith, they lost all sense of it, and even perhaps threw in the scorn on top of it. And that was a tragedy, too. So finding that middle path, and I don't think you should take any consideration that there's somehow, there's engine spirits that you can't talk to. It builds a false dichotomy that our presence here is not wanted, yet we have created national parks and we have done all these things in the land and have accomplished them quite well. So there is clearly a relationship here that has already been built, even by people, our ancestors, that preceded us, with absolutely no consideration of the divine spiritual element of nature, but yet they weren't kicked out. And it's kind of this internet thing where it's Europe has the fanciful mushroom gnomes, and then you come here and it's like shooting your AR at a Wendigo. This is all kind of more I think a psychological propaganda that leads to, ultimately it's saying, oh, the land doesn't want you, white man. And the reality is that we have done so much for the land. Sure, some of it not good, but we have done far more good. In my area alone, some of the state parks were built out of absolute nothing. It was like a fetid swamp with even poison, like literally poison water, and they managed to create and restart the system so that it like could sustain more life. And so there is relationships that our folk have. I think it's okay. You should absolutely honor them, but honor them in the parameters of our understanding, not someone else's. That's for them to do.
Absolutely. And it is important to step back and realize that Asatru is not about racism. We have a very particular circumstance that we find ourselves in that makes a focus on race particularly stand out and important in this day and age. But even, there's not prohibition from interacting with people that are different than us. It's different than intermarrying and breeding with them and them being part of your religious structure. But sometimes we allow a hyper focus on race to prevent us from normal and reasonable things, to create some big cult around the land spirits. And I think some of the confusion comes with the venerating or worshiping aspect. Being hospitable to the spirits of a place, being a good guest, being a good overlord, being a good whatever you are, has to do with your circumstance and isn't the same as worshiping them in the sense that you worship the gods or your ancestors. So I'd like to point out that too. And then I'd further like to say that the spirits of a particular place can kind of break down into two different things. There are racially specific spirits, like the spirits of deceased ancestors that look over a place. That's very different. But there's also nature spirits that exist in a neutral place that are not particular to our faith or any other place. They're simply consciousnesses that exist in the natural world around us that we interact with. Now, our ancestors have always interacted with land spirits when they've gone places, to say that, it's less racially specific to us to interact with land spirits in North America than, any other place is really splitting hairs. Our ancestors, maybe they came from the Caspian steppe, maybe they came from Hyperborea, but nobody would think twice about venerating river goddesses in Europe, because for a very long time our people have been there. But when you get further afield, it becomes stranger. But our people did this wherever they traveled, and it makes sense. Depending on your thoughts and feelings, are the spirits in North America, are they all Native American spirits? Are any of them Solutrean spirits? Are any of them, we have no idea the mists of prehistory of where people have gone. Are there, again, you could do that forever, and it would be like, we can't make use of animals that come from someplace that's not Europe. That's preposterous. How dare we, use, I don't know. I'm trying to think of if we found ourselves in India, we'd be making use of elephants and not, that's no white man would use an elephant. That's Dravidian stuff. I think when you go places, we share the natural world around us with other groups of living things. To interact in those spaces and to be respectful of spiritual forces wherever we find ourselves, I think is a wise thing for us to do. How deep of a worshipful relationship you have with them, I think, is really different. And I think that worshiping our gods is different than making offerings to spirits of the land where you're at, as far as maintaining good relationships with the spirit world. I don't think those two things are in conflict, and I think that hyper-focusing on that is going steps too far. Here's kind of a deep question, Svan. What is the relationship between gods and man? For Christians, God had unconditional love, but for pagans, isn't it the opposite? Like everything is proven with sacrifice and value? No. I've always thought the relationship was closer to an exchange. Gods are far greater than us, or greater to us, and they are life itself. We worship them because we have to coexist with them. If we want a blessing, then we have to give something up to them, because they will not give us gifts, for they do not love us, because how would a God love something that is so far beneath them? What are your thoughts?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay, first off, let me tackle the unconditional love. That's a bait and switch. I think that's pretty clear. Someone can say that they love you unconditionally, but in order for you to get into the good place, you have to do these conditions. And, whether you do them or not, I still love you unconditionally, but you got to do these conditions. So it's kind of it's a bait and switch. It's a very kind of abusive framework there. You have to do this, you have to believe this, you have to affirm this, you have to change this. But remember, the onset, even before all of these conditions, I loved you unconditionally. But you still got to do it. So it's like, what do I do? So the bait and switch there is, I think, more about a misunderstanding of Christianity in that part, because it's been sold. The love part has been sold as of late in the last century. I think you go further back, and it was pretty clear there were deep conditions, maintaining the covenant with Yahweh, etc. And I think even Jesus in the Bible spoke about maintaining these covenants, and that there was very little confusion. Even when he said, I do not come as a peacemaker, I come as a sword to sever the ties between fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. He is talking about conditions that leave you on one side of the line or the other. So the unconditional love kind of concept is something, I think, to lure people in, and then there's the conditions, the bait and switch. But that doesn't answer our relationship with the gods. And I think that we view things very differently. One, there isn't a bait and switch. It is about building a relationship with the powers of the world outside of ourselves. And I know that some modern Christians can find some connectivity there. The idea of having faith outside of ourselves, removing our ego, has a lot of potential in both religions. But for us, building that relationship is not done because we have to live with the gods. No, the idea of all of it is that it is an interconnectedness, and it's an interconnectedness with our source. The gods are the source of us, and we can become disconnected as time goes on, and that it is important to replenish that connection. That our parents do it and our grandparents do it, and unfortunately that has not been the case. Perhaps there's theories about that as well, in the idea of like the gods, knowing that there was going to be this severance time and then returning, and all of the reasons as to why. But the relationship is just that. It is a relationship that is built on worthship to the divine, to the gods. And that worth is defined by source. It's defined by that which we are attempting to do outside of ourselves. And then there was another part where I think it kind of shows the division between us. And I would definitely say, no, pagans is not the opposite of that. Because again, the unconditional love, that's a bait and switch. But you have all of the examples are in the Bible, and those are Levantine Semite pagans. I don't know a huge amount of them, but pretty wild stuff there. We're talking about European Germanic polytheism. And I think that it's not hinging on love, nor is it hinging entirely on what I do as an individual, getting the reward at the end, getting the cookie. It's not built around that. It's built about how I am in the ecosystem of my family, how I am in the ecosystem of my tribe or my nation, how I am in the ecosystem with my ancestors and the land spirits, and ultimately then to the ecosystem with the gods. We share this space with them, and we are of and from them, and we get a chance to celebrate this existence. That's why when we had mentioned the books, the Asatru, the native religion, native European religion, is one of the key factors that really sticks out there is a celebration of life. We are part of this process, and our coming forth is another event in that process. And we get a chance to share it, and we get a chance to share it with others. And if our families or siblings or anybody connected to us in this ecosystem fall short, that happens. But you find it, you join the church, you find this ecosystem, and you get a chance to share and experience life and enjoy life. You try to, it's not hedonism. It's obviously you bring upon duties upon yourself because you know that the gods are watching, and anybody who just hedonistically runs off, that's not good. Anybody who's completely inactive, that's not good. So we see the gods are interacting with us in a relationship that ultimately is about us being thankful and learning how to best express that thankfulness to the gods in life. And the gods don't want unconditional worship. They don't want some sort of jealousy condition where if you put other gods before them, it's not, they didn't set that basis. Instead, they set the basis of how can you be a greater person of the folk that they know we can be. And one of those conditions is building that relationship and giving worth to that which is worthy. You give worth to your elders, you give worth to your children, you give worth to the gods. You are doing this because you're part of that ecosystem. So it's not diametrically opposite, nor is it atomizing. Christianity has a tendency to atomize because the bait and switch. Your grandma could be a great person, but if she didn't accept Jesus into her heart, if she didn't do this, if she didn't do that, you can follow the trail. Those are conditions. Whether the person defining the split says they loved you before then, those are still conditions. What we see is the overarching connectivity between all of us. And that's why when we measure things like good and evil, we consider them in relation to how they affect the people around. It's like the murder dilemma, killing dilemma in Christianity. A lot of military people come back from wars really, really twisting themselves up about the fact that they killed someone else. In our faith, the idea is that if you are defending your people, if you are holding true to your honor and your duty, then you are not, it's not some grand sin to fight a warrior from another land. And in a way, too, you kind of end up building a connectivity there of respect for them as well, because they're doing the same thing. So I think that the balance and the interconnectivity is being lost because many Christians only think about their individual soul, and they kind of have been taken by the bait and switch. It's unconditional love, except if you don't follow these conditions. And that intellectual dishonesty to the self creates a kind of confusion when they encounter a group of polytheistic Germanic, pagans, and they immediately default to the way that the Judeans viewed their neighbors, and that really misconstrues, I think, a lot of what they're attempting to do if they're genuinely trying to learn. So you have to kind of step back, pull some away from yourself, and then come in with fresh eyes. Because I see a little bit of kind of a framework, and I understand that might be the only framework you have that you're coming from. But that framework needs to be destroyed in order to understand where our folk are coming from in our relationship with the gods.
Yeah, so I think there's always danger of misunderstanding when you try to define paganism as the opposite of Christianity. It's never going to be the opposite of anything because it's not defined. It isn't a reaction to. It wasn't created as a antagonist towards Christianity. It is an independent, completely separate thing. So you'll notice things that are similar, and you'll notice perhaps more things that are dissimilar, but nothing is a counterpoint to. That's just not how it was created. That's not how it grew, and that's not how it's developed. So again, like Svan said, the depiction of the Jewish God loving unconditionally is not borne out by the terrible things inflicted upon the people that don't meet his conditions in their holy book. I think that's self-evident in any reading of the Old Testament. And I think that defining all mankind of worthy of death and destruction isn't showing love for them. But wait, he doesn't do that to everyone. There's a condition, the condition that you give your life over to Jesus. So there's clearly a condition. You are right in the sense that you need to show worth to our gods. Our understanding is, and it is easy to get too polaric in how we view things. I don't presume that our gods have some deep, abiding love for each and every one of our people. I don't mean to say that maybe they don't. We would like for them to love us and care for us. We achieve that by building a relationship with them and by making ourselves worthy of their notice. But so that gap of worthiness isn't insurmountable. One of the last part of the question is, how could the gods love something so far beneath them? Because they're gods and they can do big things. We wouldn't want to limit what they can or can't do. They can love big things, they can love small things, they can love all things in between. They're not beholden to or obliged to, but they certainly can. And I don't think that it is transactional in the marketplace sense of that. But it is transactional in the medieval sense of it. And you see transaction between unequal forces throughout medieval Europe, and it's one of those defining things, the relationship between lord and retainer, or between a knight and their serfs, or whatever else. The gifts exchanged aren't equal, but the intention is there. Like you would, if you're a serf, you would give your lord labor and produce, or you would provide labor and produce and things. In exchange, they would allow you a piece of land to work and their protection and various other things. It's always in relationship to the person. Your relationship, a knight's relationship to the king. The king would owe them protection or lands or equipment, and you would owe the king your military service and your loyalty, your fealty. It's not a one-for-one kind of exchange, and it's very frequently seen in Europe between unequal people, and that roots itself from our tradition. No, we can never give the gods something equivalent to what they can give us, but it doesn't invalidate the sharing and the relationship through gift giving reciprocally back and forth. It's like giving gifts to members of your family is, yes, they give you gifts and you exchange gifts, is not the same transactional relationship as going to the store and purchasing something, though it does involve exchange of resources. So I think that it's slightly different that way. But I also think that our lore is full of expressions that the gods do care about individuals. Now, often the individuals they care about are heroes or kings or great people. That's kind of the nature of the literary tradition. But if they have the capacity to care about individual mortals, certainly we can work towards building that and earning their care for us. Something that I brought up while Svan was speaking that I've always thought was kind of a poignant thing. It's from a poem, Spekingr, which is a section of the Eriksmal poem about Eric the Blood Axe. "What kind of dream is it," said Odin, "in which just before daybreak I thought I cleared Valhall for the coming of slain men. I waked the Einherjar, bade Valkyries rise up to strew the bench and scour the beakers, wine to carry, as for a king's coming. Here to me I expected heroes coming from the world, certain great ones, so glad is my heart." The idea that the poet accepted the concept that the Allfather would be gladdened and happy to see the arrival of noteworthy heroes from the world of the living is telling of the belief of our ancestors, and is, I can say in my life and in my understanding, I have absolutely felt the love of the gods in many, many ways. I wouldn't want to presume their feelings towards me. I don't mean to do that and be presumptuous, but I have greatly appreciated their blessings, and I know that they hear me when I reach out and speak to them, and they have blessed me many times over, and I'm very appreciative of it. They've certainly shown me love or shown me favor in that way, and I think that that's absolutely something. I think that they love our folk. Who and to what degree, that's for them to decide, not for me to dictate. But I have no reason to think that that's not a thing, and there's nothing in our lore that tells us that's not a thing. I think that's I think that's something that is kind of from the chest thumping sword and sorcery school of understanding that's got itself woven into a certain thread of early modern Asatru, and I think it's kind of persistent. I think it's a similar thread to the people that talk about, we don't kneel before our gods and things that way. I don't think it's meant badly, but I do think it comes from a similar kind of misunderstanding and kind of like making our faith a counterpoint to Christianity and an enhanced, like, I don't know, exaggerated bravado that's not there. But yeah, that's what I would say to that. This is something you said earlier, Svan. The Disir are connected to the earth. Is that what he was saying earlier when you were talking about the different forces in the world, the Risir and the Thursir and things like that earlier? Can you clarify?
Yeah, I think, did you say Disir? because the Disir are connected to the blood. The Risi or Thurser are connected to the land, but it's not a clean cut specification. It's kind of more or less it's like the word enemy or friend. An enemy is antagonistic, a friend is not. An ally is not, but a foe is antagonistic. So these classifications are not super clean. The idea Jotuns being ancient and Risi being like the mountains and Thurser being aggressive. That's where you can kind of take a lot of that, and you can't always just say, well, it says this clearly. It's like, again, the definition of the word in Old Norse is not. It's kind of a broad word, just like the word monster or just like the word guardian. But Disir are connected to the blood, and Risi is generally another word utilized in compound words with Jotun. And they have a tendency, based on all the lore and observation, some can be negative towards the Aesir, and some can be positive. And some switch. They start out negative and then become positive. But ultimately, it is about intention. Intention is, I think, one of the driving factors. The Jotun are not some different like race of people, and that collectively, the Aesir are one race. No, it's their intention, their dominion in the world is built in this direction, and the Jotnar have a different intention. Sometimes it lines up, or they join the intention of the Aesir, and other times it goes beyond, it goes the opposite of lining up, and it becomes antagonistic. I would say Thurser, though, has more of connotations towards mankind, our folk encountering spirits of the land that are clearly aggressive and malicious, and hence the reason why that word, I think, eventually morphed into troll, which is akin to like monster or demon. So, but yeah, Disir are connected to the blood. They're clearly, there are Nornirs. They are part of the Nornir hierarchy structure, and they are connected to the individual members of the families.
So, question about Thor, who's called half Jotun, but his mother is the earth, so the noble spring land when the thunderstorms happen. Upper part of Ymir, destroying the plague and arguments. He is half Risi, not half Thurs, right? Regarding Thor. Svan, do you follow the question, and what is your reaction?
I think first off, that's kind of what I was just talking about. There's a lot of confusion in that. I think there was also a lot of confusion in that during Snorri Sturluson's time, because we can also see the earth honored in previous iterations, like Tacitus's Germania. So again, if the word Jotnar doesn't have an antagonistic title, it's not simply the opposite of the gods. It is what they're doing, their intention, their place. If they are a combination of order and chaos, then they would not be of the gods of order. They're in the middle somewhere. And again, the striker, the Aryan god, the third part of the tripartite, which is the striker, is in every Aryan classification of religion and always connected between the earth and the sky. Even the Greco-Romans did it, though they humanized him through Hercules, but the concept is still there. There's a deep connection between the strength and the might of the earth and the strength and the might of heaven being aligned through the god Thor, or through the whether it's Tyrannus amongst the Gaulish Celts or what have you. These stories do change based on the cultural references that they come from. But there are people, again, that try to classify, oh, Ymir's upper body, that's symbolic for these type of Jotuns, and lower body for these type of Jotuns. And none of that actually really matters, because the lore is very clear. After Ymir is slain and his blood comes and the gods shape the earth, the Jotnar line descend from Bergelmar. And it is really clear that not all of the Jotuns, by the time that the gods start moving around in their dominion after the war with the Vanir, that some of them are not against the gods at all. Some are indifferent and some are antagonistic. So that's what kind of, I think that comes from Abrahamic religions, where they have these kind of classifications, like there's a cherubim and a Nephilim, and they do all of these kind of, they need categorizations. And then when they don't get that in our faith, they get very, they start cramming things into different spots. And if they have the intention of, oh, the gods are race mixing with another race, the Jotnar are a totally different race. No, Lord Odin, the Jotnar, the ancient ones of Niflheim, that's where they source from, and Adumla and her creation. So it kind of becomes ridiculous if you lightly map it out, but people are desperately looking for definitive points. So yes, Lord Thor is a connection between the middle world and the heavenly world. He is somewhat kind of like fighting fire with fire. The aggressive Jotnar, who are chaos, he can bring that chaos. But he is also of the order of the gods. So he is that ability to kind of bend the rules, to kind of attack things at a different mode of thought. And that's what makes him so special. And, you know, we could talk about even just the physical sense of the iron rod in the belt and magnetism and all of those things connected to the earth and protecting us from solar radiation, etc. That's all really fun to look at. But at the end of the day, there is this deep connection, the link, and the reason why our faith has the hammer as a symbol of our faith is because it is the worldly divine and the cosmically divine connected, and it's connected through Holy Thor.
So I'd like to thank Nicholas from Ohio for his $20 donation, 20 to general fund, or I'm sorry, 10 to the general fund and 10 towards paying off Racehoff. Thank you for that. And the first one to take us up on the Double the Timbers Challenge, dollar for dollar donation challenge. We got $20 from Jeffrey from Texas towards the Sigerheim Pavilions. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. And Nick, could you mark that down so we can keep a tally of that until we reach our goal? All right. That said, question for you. Go ahead, Svan.
I was going to say there was another kind of add-on question to Thor.
Sure. Go ahead and hit it.
It says Thor is part matter, ? Fjorgyn, which is why he can't go across the Bifrost Bridge. One, the Bifrost Bridge, and the overarching poetic point of the Bifrost Bridge is that the accessibility that heaven has is a fragile thing. It's a thing that is allocated to those who are very special. I think that the bridge shattering is again showing just the massive power that is Lord Thor. And you know, your interpretation of part matter could very well, you know, that's I think a theological concept that we could definitely kind of put into frame, and I think it would be interesting. I think it does have merit, but I don't think one correlates to the other. I think that the real point of him crossing over the cooling river and the Serpentine River to get to the wellspring in heaven is because the bridge is not for everyone. Access into the divine heavenly realm is for the heroic, for the advanced, for those who have broken through and above into understanding the perennial truths. But that's not saying that Lord Thor can't do it. What it is saying is that he's just so big and powerful and massive that such a fragile thing can be destroyed by his presence. Do I believe, though, about his connection to matter? I do believe that he has a deep connection to matter, but is not simply half matter, or I don't think we can classify that and say, oh yeah, Thor is part of matter. I think he can be part of matter if he wants to, and I think perhaps maybe the idea is that because he's connected to it, it's easier. Then you see some of the other gods perfectly content working within the realms of the heavenly, like Frigg, and has all matter come to her in the story. But I think it's an emphasis poetically, yes, that he is connected and has the ability to connect to the middle world, as he is. We often say he's the son of heaven and earth. So.
All right. Question for you gentlemen. Can you talk about Skavi? And why isn't she listed as a goddess on the website? Can we worship her, though, or no? Svan, what say you?
Yeah, that's kind of why we're going over the Gylfaginning, because in the Gylfaginning, it clearly states the Ausinjur and it states the Aus. And a lot of people have been confused over the decades as to why, say, Idun or Sif is not mentioned in the Gylfaginning. Well, authors have taken their attempts to frame this, but they never do it in a sense of hierarchy, and that has caused, I think, even more confusion. But they generally call them troll wives or Jotun brides or what have you, and I think that is because they're attempting to foreign the Jotuns and make them foreign so that they can push some sort of narrative. But the reality is that when King Galfi talks to High, Justice High in the third, he says, these are the gods and these are the goddesses that the folk should pray to. But we clearly know that there are forces that are connected to the gods that are beloved by them. So the word Austvenir was kind of settled on. Aust meaning like great, and Vinir, friend or beloved one. So it's a beloved one, and they enter into the hierarchy along with the Himmenverder. So they're not expanded upon in the Trulogmal because it would drag the intent of the Trulogmal down. They're mentioned briefly, but the whole point of it is that it's a direct, concentrated shot of our divinity and our theological framework in a concise point. And if we went into all of the Austvanir and how the relationships between the the Jotun forces that align themselves with cosmic order, and some are done through oaths and some are done through marriage in the stories, and what is marriage between it would drag the purpose of it down. So I think that they will be expounded on much more in the future. And I also think that it's absolutely okay for our folk to honor them and build relationships with them. They are with our gods, but it is clear that the Gylfaginning says these are the gods that our folk should worship. So,
yeah, I think that there's sometimes there's a subtle distinction that is meaningful. As we've kind of codified in the Trulagmal, these are the gods that you should worship. That doesn't mean that you can't also include some local deities or other elements from our lore, like the Heminvrother or the Alsvanir or things like that. But it is that we proactively focus on the worship of the ones that are listed, to try to list every heavenly character in all of our lore and the history of our folk and our people for all time would be endlessly confusing and tedious. And we have clear directive on, these are the ones that it's particularly important that we focus on. So I don't think it's wrong to honor her. It's not attested that she is the one that we should be spending, a particular point of making sure that we give worship to. And I think that's the only question or only point on that. On another question, says Troubled Guest, is rune pulling / rune casting something you guys do? Or is that just a modern thing? And can runes give you protection, like if you were to wear one or draw one on your body? So, yes, we do that. No, it's not just a modern thing. People will try to tell you that it is. Those people are confused. We have, we have examples of it from the lore. Tacitus talks about it very early on. I think that undoubtedly the way that we do it is probably not exactly the same as Gothar did it way back when. And the way Gothar did it in 900 is probably different than they did it in 100, and probably different than they did it 1000 BC. So I think that, the methodology changes over time and evolves with time and place and experience. But yeah, rune pulling and rune casting is absolutely something that I believe both Svan and I do. And runes can absolutely give you protection. Or they can be used as protective sigils if done correctly, if the intent is there. I have seen people with very carefully constructed and very meaningful runic amulets or very important runic tattoos and things that are absolutely something to be a point of protection. I've seen other people very casually approach them, and I don't think their runes give them any protection at all. I think there is a very important subjective component to rune magic that you have to be engaged, or at least the person who created them or put things in motion. There has to be a will behind it. You can't just make a drawing and it do magical stuff. There has to be an intention behind what it does. They have to be empowered in their usage, and that doesn't necessarily have to be by the one who's wearing them or the one who has possession of the runic item, but it certainly has to do with the person who's created them. I don't think you get magical efficacy out of accidental things. Now, you can do them wrong and misuse your intentionality and then backfire or not work as intended. Absolutely. But again, that is a like a misshapen intentionality, but it's still intention. It's not just, oh, I randomly crossed two sticks and it made a gabo magic, engage. It's not, it doesn't work like that in that way. Svan, do you have something to add on that?
No, I think you covered it. I know that there are people on the internet that do say, "Oh, it doesn't say runes specifically when Tacitus is talking about casting lots," but you know, that utilizing that to dismantle something that clearly is set, that transfers beyond writing, is very disingenuous. I see it a lot with Ostra and Easter and the eggs and all of these things. Oh no, but it wasn't written about, so therefore it's not real. And again, they're picking and choosing the little things that they want in order to knock it down. Pulling lots, divining in these senses. But I think there's one point I would bring is that I like to look at the runes as something of going to the deepest, darkest, and farthest point is the sound waves that Lord Odin and all the mysteries of, when he synthesized himself with the circulatory system of the universe that is Yggdrasil, and going and following the roots all the way down into the primordial points of sound. And then what we look at when we're doing rune pulling and when we're doing protection, these points are tapping into those powers with our intention, like Asatru said. But these are very, I think these are very mortal usages, and that there's layered understandings of the runes, but we are, only able to utilize them in within the capacity of our understanding, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not an insult on ourselves as beings, but we're not gods, and so the runes for the gods in their usage and makeup might be very, almost incomprehensible to us, and then our stories are just trying to let us grasp some of that. But yet, at the same time, as is viable in all things, a breeze on one side of the world can affect so much. So too does the great powers of the runes allow us, with our intention, open up our consciousness to these powers so we can utilize them for protection, or to get kind of glimmers into interpreting the way that Orlaw is going to play out. And I think that people have a hard time differentiating that or conceptualizing that. That's all I wanted to say about it.
Well, I'd like to just consult the text, and it's funny because this translation of Tacitus just straight up says runes.
Oh,
that's always been the understanding until modern actuallys want to find fault. I think it may have been closer to marks or carved marks into sticks. Could that be something other than runes? I suppose. Is the most obvious answer runes? Yes.
Yeah.
So let's go with that, because that's what makes sense. And it's very similar. It's exactly what people do today often in their rune casting. Germania 10 says, for auspices and the casting of lots, they have the highest possible regard. Their procedure in casting lots is uniform. They break off a branch of a fruit tree and slice it into strips. They distinguish these by certain runes and throw them, as random chance will have it, onto a white cloth. Then the priest of the state, if the consultation is a public one, and the father of the family, if it is private, after a prayer to the gods and an intent, gaze heavenward, pick up 3, one at a time, and read their meaning from the runes scored on them. So that is described in one of our earliest sources that's lore on how our ancestors practiced our faith. Again, that translation just straight up says runes because it's the most sensical answer. They certainly carve symbols or markings onto sticks and use them as we would runes. So I think it's incredibly solid. But that's how they used to practice it. That's how a great many of us practice today. That's typically what I do as a 3-rune pull. That's the most common, I would say, that people do. So there's that, just for a point of information on it. Matt and Svan, do either of you ever do sauna/cold plunge contrast therapy? No, I certainly do not. I don't like the cold. Honestly, I don't like saunas either. I like hot tubs. I like hot tubs a lot. They help me a lot as my older I get, the more my joints hurt and I get sore. Hot tubs do a lot to loosen up my muscles, help my joints, and overall feel nice. But sauna is not my friend. I don't like the trouble it gives me breathing, and I have not tried the cold plunge deal. I've heard lots of good things about it. I am not speaking against the science involved. It just sounds very unpleasant, and I have not felt the need to do it because I don't want to experience that unpleasantness. What about you, Svan?
It is
Mr. Alaska man don't like the cold. Well, he don't like the hot either here.
Not liking the cold in Alaska is how you survive. Same with Iceland too. No. It is unpleasant, but then there's like this body rush afterwards. I've done both, and I do gotta say, I like so I will do 15 minutes at 170-degree sauna, and I don't do them. That's the only thing. The question said, like, do you do them in contrast? I don't do them in contrast. I generally will focus on one particular at the time, for various reasons. And I think I look at saunas for circulatory recovery, and I look at hot tubs for muscular recovery, and I look for cold plunge for onset of activity, a kind of getting cold and then slowly starting to warm yourself up with movement and then warming yourself up with activity. So I don't necessarily do the whole hot, cold. I think that those kind of things, I don't know if they have some adverse effect, but I just don't enjoy doing one and then the other. But I have done them just in their own allotted times. And I agree with you, Asatru. The recovery in the muscle with the sauna, with the hot tub, seems to work, especially if I do a leg day and my legs are feeling really rickety. I could go into a sauna and walk out and I'm still in the same, but I feel far more relaxed, and the muscles seem to have gotten a chance to recover when I do the the hot tub, the hot immersion in water. But there's a rush that comes from cold plunging that I think really kind of gets you in proper headspace, especially if you go in and move your body and break there's a slight barrier that's kind of created. You break that barrier and it is very, very intense. And then you get up and slowly start to kind of move out of that, and you have this energy from it. It's very strange getting that kind of hyper sense from it. You wouldn't think, but it's there. I don't know about doing one after the other.
Yeah, I've read a lot about, and a lot of people do the alternating hot and cold. I've never gotten any benefit out of that. Um, has the EFA ever received anger or hate messages from Christians after moving into a new neighborhood or after setting up a Hof in what was once a church? Svan.
I've got some schizo mail with drawings all over them, ballpoint pen. It looked like something like a Rob Zombie cover. And we get it at Thorsoff about once a year. And it's the same stuff. Repent, worship Yahweh, God of the Jews, or go to bad place, Gehenna. And it just it's a lot of rambling. I never really keep it. I read it more for entertainment. I feel like it would be rude not to, because of all the effort that this one guy puts into it. And the drawings are pretty cool. But that's the one that sticks out to me. Every now and then we'll get an offshoot one where it'll say that. And I remember too, we used to get emails that were like, Christianity, Jesus would never exclude people by race. And I always used to write back to them, I'm sorry for your confusion, but we're not a Christian church. And they would kind of not know what to do with that, very rarely respond back. Because it was just the onset of their own confusion that brought them in. But the guy that sends stuff, and I think I'm due for one this year at Thorsoff. So yes, but I can only speak for myself. I don't know about other Hof Gothi at the other Hofs.
Yeah, it's very irregular. Like, you can't say none. That's not what the problem is, though. Usually, the people that get grumpy give us a hard time because of they're woke and we're not, and we're racially aware. And that's the thing. It's more of a, them being mad and saying, racism's bad and woke stuff. A lot more left versus right, like chaotic wokeness versus traditional stuff. Very seldom is it a Christian thing. As a matter of fact, we've gotten a lot of positive response from Christians, both pastors and congregants, on stuff that we do. We have a number of different churches that will send people to our food banks and encourage their parishioners to come get food when we're doing our food pantries every month. So far more positive. Usually the stuff we get is from, social justice warrior people, not from Christians that are mad at what we're doing. And so something that we've gotten more of than the opposite, and there have been a couple of people that are upset, but most of what we've got in relation to us getting former churches has been people that used to, celebrate, they used to be congregants there specifically. And I think this has happened at Thorshof too, but I know specifically it's happened at Baldershof, to where they'll come and they'll be really happy that somebody's taking care of the place, and they'll want to reminisce about how they got married there, decades ago, or how they had, they used to go to dances there however long ago. We've had a lot of that around Baldershof. I believe we've had some of that at Thorshof. We've definitely had that at Odenshof. Odenshof started out as a grange hall for the Grangers, and then over it was built in 1938, I believe. So over its time, it's been a number of different things, and some of those it's been a church at different points. It's also been like I think a Christian school at one point. And so, yeah, those people are glad people are taking care of the building, and it's showing some love. Most of the places that we've purchased have been neglected and not well cared for quite some time. So people are happy to find that they're getting taken care of for the most part. It's fun.
I was going to speak a little bit on that. I know that you have expressed too that people have said ridiculous things about the churches and stuff like that, and or like buying churches and so on and so forth. When Thorshof was coming about, and I didn't know Thorshof was going to be, real estate is and all of that. I was looking at schools. There's in Western Virginia, there's a couple of school buildings. So a lot of the people that try to, I think, throw a lot of detraction at us because they don't have anything, and they're like, oh, they're doing it in a church. And it's like, no, we're finding these buildings and rebuilding them up and dedicating them to the gods. And whether it's a Grange Hall or a school or a former Christian church, people that try to like claw at that and gnash their teeth, I think it's just it's that desperation of just wanting to cause pain, and really to cause pain towards the gods, because they can't let that be a thing that happens. No, if it was us, we would build a Viking reenactment religion or building, and it's like, it's so ridiculous. So I really find it interesting when you bring it up, and I had forgot. Yeah, the Grange Hall is its history there as well. And lastly, there was a woman who came in during the mural. She while I was painting at Thorshof, and she was absolutely just so happy that we were going to keep the building, because she was afraid that it was going to get demolished, and that's why she was there. And we were like, no, we're not demolishing the building. And then we also showed her Mr. Bethay's grave on the side, and she was deeply moved by that we were tending that grave and caring for his grave. And so nothing but just positive sense. And her congregation had moved to Irwin Methodist. So it's not like there was some lamentation that her church had died, that the congregation just had moved, but she wanted to make sure that the building was still there, and it was, and we had no intention of disrespecting anyone there, anything there. We were just practicing our faith there now. And just that Southern hospitality of it, she was just absolutely enamored with the idea of it all. So
yeah, the reaction's been, and again, there's a lot of comments online or whatever that is far more about wokeness than it is about religion. And when the news just focuses on racism and not on Asatru, there are Christians that will be concerned, as Svan said earlier, like that we're doing Christianity wrong. And then they stop and we're like, no, like we're not Christian. That's not what we're doing. They're like, oh, okay. And it ceases being an issue with the vast majority of people. So The battlefield where we get pushback isn't really that, but honestly, we don't experience that in real life most of the time. Most of the real life interaction with people, be they Christian or otherwise, has been great.
Yeah,
The vast majority of that is online heckling. It's not, in real life, we have tons of really, really positive things in the interaction with folks. So that is Victory Never Sleeps for this evening. We covered a minute amount of the Gylfaginning. That's fine. We had great conversation. I appreciate everybody's questions. Next time that Svan and I are on here, we will cover at least the Valhalla portions of the Gylfaginning, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you so much to everyone who's been so very, very generous today with their donations. We appreciate that a lot. And do remember that Jill has got the Double the Timbers funds matching situation with any money up to $300 that comes in for the Sigerhane Pavilion. So anybody doing that from now until the 20th, your money will be twice as effective because she is willing to match your contribution. So thank you guys. Again, thank you guys for everything. Svan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Nick, thank you for your production. And you guys have a great evening. Until next time, hail the Aesir, hail the Folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.
And thank you to Matt for giving me an episode for next week, so we have a proper outro this week for the first time in a month.
Do what I can.